Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome. Please find your seats. Thanks for being here, ILA students, faculty, and mentors. As always, it's great to see you. And other guests, thanks for being here today. We're really excited about today's convocation. I do have a couple of announcements for ILA students before we get into the topic for today. Congratulations, by the way, on making it past midterm. Excellent. Your hard work, diligence, perseverance, resilience continues to be needed to get through the rest of the semester, so keep it up. We are headed into advising and registration season, so I wanted to give you a heads up about a couple of things that are happening soon, just so that they are on your radar. First of all, next Wednesday, that's October 23rd, the afternoon is what we call mentoring day. So your classes are going to be canceled from 1 o'clock until 4:50, specifically so that you can attend meetings of other departments. All of the departments and programs across campus are preparing great presentations specifically for you, so please take advantage of those opportunities. Then the next day, October 24th, which is a Thursday, we do not have a convocation. Ooh, I know. So that day is really designed as an opportunity to give all of you time to have advising meetings. I'm not sure exactly what your instructor is going to use that Thursday for, but it is expected that all of you are going to be meeting with your advisor. So we gave you just a little bit of time to work that out. The following Thursday, we do have a convocation. That is October 31st. Costumes are optional. That day will be presented by the registrar, Christy Hippen, and she will be talking to you about many of the details about our academic programs, about good academic progress, but also some of the nuts and bolts of how actually do you register for classes, because that is something that you do for yourselves. So be aware that we have a lot of advising and registration conversations coming up over the next few weeks. So at this point, I will shift gears, and I'm going to invite to the stage Regina Johnson, who is our Director of Multicultural Student Services. Did I get that right? Was I close? Okay.
Good morning. How is everybody today? Good. I'm going to jump right in. What college was meant to be was the slogan that decorated the fancy letterhead and flyers that filled my mailbox in 1995. Not long after, the recruiting phone calls began, and the lure of this fascinating unknown was growing stronger and stronger. What was college meant to be? In my home, growing up, college was something I had been told was not possible because it took money. But I found myself wanting it more and more, and by God, how was I actually going to make it happen? As I started going on college visits with my friends and by myself, I began to realize that college was also going to be my opportunity to finally find myself. You see, I was raised not only to believe that college wasn't meant for me, but to protect the identity that was given to me by my mother's irresponsible choice of dating a black man. Growing up in a family and in a town in which you were too white to be black and too black to be white left me a 17-year-old trapped in a life of choices that she didn't make for herself. The day finally came that I got to visit the campus that had promised me, right, that it was what college was meant to be. I met the coaches and the team on that fall visit day in 1996. I knew that was where I belonged. Yet, how does one ever really know where they belong when they don't really know who they are? The bumps and bruises of my college inexperience reminded me that I was a stranger, trapped in what others expected of her. Then one day it happened. This boisterous young man and his friends from Graham Hall stopped me on the sidewalk to make conversation. Little did any of us know that at that time, it was the moment that would change all of us forever. That day would mark the beginning of a group of college kids that would come together as not just friends, but family. growing and shifting and changing into young men and women which shared life's intersected identities as the foundation in which built it. Today, 23 years later, I am honored to share this space with 3 people that helped to change my life forever. And being here with them is an understatement. It is exciting. Being here with them is so exciting. To say it's exciting is an understatement. They are not only my friends, but my family, my community, and today we will share with you a real and genuine insight to becoming and belonging within lives and friendships many often will not challenge themselves to ever be part of. I'd like to welcome to the stage 3 of my best friends, Carmen Alvarado, Dr. Frank Clark, and Ken Morris Jr. Just a little bit. I will add that the slides up here are a culmination of 5 years of fun and excitement here on this campus. So appreciate the nostalgia of the dress and the interaction and the dorm rooms that still look the same, okay? We are going to go through a series of questions and just have dialogue such as we have had for the last 20 years of our lives. So I'm going to open up and pose to the group, who were you when you got here to Monmouth College? As you remember back to that day, can you specifically talk about the type of person you perceived yourself being? How did where you grew up or where you came from and the people you grew up with help to shape that image of yourself?
All right. Good morning. All right. Good to be with you all, and it's nice to see some familiar faces and my coach and some of my former professors. So I haven't been back on campus. It's been 17 years. So yeah, it's good. Go Scots. So all right. All right. So again, I'm Frank Clark. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. Anybody from the South Side of Chicago? All right. Very good. Very good. I'm from the Wild Hundreds, which is way south. Close to Cal Park, Blue Island area. 129th, Peoria, here we go. Pardon me? 183rd, all right. So before coming to Monmouth back in 1999, I actually came from Wisconsin. So I went to a boarding school in Wisconsin called Wayland Academy. Which is in Beaverdale, Wisconsin. And when I got here, I knew I considered myself to be an ambitious young man. I knew that I wanted to go to medical school. I was going to be a pediatrician. I knew I was going to major in biology. You couldn't convince me otherwise. But in retrospect, as I think back to that first day I stepped on campus, even though I was this ambitious young man from Chicago, I was lost. In terms of who I was and personally. So career-wise, I knew who I wanted to be, but personally, I was lost. And a lot of that had to do with my upbringing. So I grew up, my mom mainly raised me, but I grew up in a home where I had a partially absent father, but who was also partially present. And I was used to being busy. And when I say busy, so I used to play, I have a fine arts background. I grew up doing tap, ballet, and jazz. I also used to play the flute. I played in the orchestra here, and I also sang in the choir. So I was always used to just doing things to keep me busy, and I really didn't process what my upbringing had meant to me as a person. So when I stepped on campus, even though I was confident, I was probably in retrospect, very insecure. But the things that kept me grounded, running track, running cross country, being involved in other activities on campus, and then my studies. So as I grew older, and I'll talk about this later because there's another question towards that, but when I think retrospectively, confident but lost in some ways.
Very good. Hello, everybody. I'm Carmen. So I grew up in Pilsen. Any Pilsen? No? All right. But prior to coming to Monmouth, so in Pilsen, not quite as polished as it is these days. So I found myself kind of getting pulled into and kind of flirting with the gang lifestyle, just different stuff that inner city kids kind of tend to get into. Those of you who have a Mexican mother know that was not going to be put up with at all. So she moved us out to the suburbs. So prior to coming to Monmouth, I had to kind of deal with transitioning from inner city, Pilsen, to northern suburb of Chicago, which was just completely different. So through my kind of latter years of high school, I felt like an outsider. I was the majority of Mexicans that I interacted with in high school. I'm Mexican, my parents are from Mexico. Were from Mexico, they had immigrated from Mexico. And so I had never gone to Mexico. I still, in my lifetime, have never been to Mexico, but I knew I was Mexican because my parents raised me in that culture. But I wasn't Mexican enough, right? And so being from, and going into a suburb, I obviously wasn't white either. So just kind of being the kind of lone person and not really knowing who to hang out with, I kind of floated through like a social butterfly, and felt like every few months I'd have a different group that I was interacting with. So that happened. So I came to Monmouth, pretty quiet, pretty private, chip on my shoulder. Matter of fact, I still get teased amongst our group to this day because for the first 2 weeks, I did not speak. I did not say a word. Hung out every day. Hung out 24/7 with this group of folks. Didn't say a word. And it literally took getting a black eye from my roommate as we ran into each other for me to speak to her. And then she is one of my best friends to this day. So I just kind of, it took a lot for me to open up. It took a lot for me to kind of, figure out where I was in my place in life. And I owe that a lot to the wonderful folks that I met here. Some of them, the folks that I'm sitting here on stage with. So.
My turn. What up, though, Monmouth College? How y'all doing? That was garbage. How y'all doing? There we go. Okay. First, I see some familiar faces. Want to give it up to my former football coach, Roger Hayes. My Mama Meeker, where you at? And my cool auntie, Stacy Lotes, where y'all at? That's how some of the roles these people played in my life. But thank you for having me. My name is Ken Morris Jr. I'm from Peoria, Illinois. Who's from the P up in here? All right, stand up, P. That's all right. I know it's a little woo, but I got you. We got to represent. That's all good. So the question was, who were you when you got to Monmouth College? I had a circuitous route before I came to Monmouth. I came here almost as a non-traditional student. I had graduated from Manual High School in Peoria, and for most of my life, I come from a predominantly black neighborhood, and for me, most of my life, I was an athlete, right? And that was the most salient part of my identity. Growing up and being immersed in a black culture, that didn't stand out because I just thought that, coming from, Southside Peoria, that's all I see, that's all I knew. So that identity of being an athlete was more salient for me. So unfortunately, I didn't do as well in high school. I didn't have a lot of academic superlatives, and I didn't have a lot of opportunities. I was very egotistical, so I thought that my talent, warranted, scholarships at larger schools and I wasn't getting that kind of attention, and so I could have gone D2 or D3, but I squandered those opportunities and didn't have no place to go at all. So I ended up going to ICC, Illinois Central College, and I wasn't focused. So those first 2 years, I pretty much wasted. I flunked out. Like who flunks out of a junior college? I did, right? So anyway, I got readmitted, and under the condition that I had to show improvement every year. And so I wasted first 2 years, and then the next 2 years I took real seriously. Also, it's because my father was like, yo, if you want to go to college, you're going to have to pay for it on your own. Like, you wasted my money. I'm not, you can go to the service or go to get a trade, but if you want to do this college thing, and I was first generation. My mom had passed from cancer, so my dad is a single dad, working at Caterpillar as a laborer. He didn't have a lot of resources or supports. And so anyway, I had to figure it out on my own. So fast forward, I get to Monmouth, and I was up here on the hope and the prayer. I mean, I think I was telling somebody last night, if not for, Mary Beth Dews Kemp, I think, was the admission officer at the time, when she looked at my transcript, I thought that they weren't going to accept me, but, they saw something in me that I didn't recognize in myself. And so when I got here, I thought, this was a good opportunity to try something different. So always playing sports and being sort of a spectator when it comes to student leadership, I thought, you know what, let's flip the script. No one knows me. Let me take on more of a leadership role. And because I was a little older, I was thinking, too, I was like, there's not that many students of color. So, let me try to, build a community and coalition because there was a lot of resources for underrepresented students. And so that's how I, met Carmen and her peer group and connecting with some of the international students that are already here. And we just, created our own family. And then I just kind of thrusted myself and just taking on leadership roles, opportunities, not really, having a leadership background. And so that's sort of what thrusted me into some of the things that I'm doing now professionally.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about where you came from. Was there something about who you were when you arrived in the grand scheme of things that you thought to yourself, Ken spoke a little bit to it, but for Carmen and Frank, did you want to reinvent? What did you want to reinvent about who you were once you got here?
So one of the things I wanted to reinvent, not just for myself, but for my family. I'm the youngest of 5. And all of my siblings had gone to college. None of them had graduated, right? So I felt stepping on this campus that I kind of represented my family as a whole. And I wanted to succeed. I wanted to be the one, to graduate. So I felt like I just felt like a weight on my shoulders. Like I just had to do this, not just for myself, but for my family. So that was something that I wanted to kind of reinvent, kind of, the culture that my family's kind of tradition of just like, this happened, but you didn't finish or you didn't complete. I wanted to make sure that I made it to completion and moved forward. I wanted to kind of change kind of the path for my family, right? So I feel like that's definitely one thing that I needed to change. I came to campus a little rough around the edges, probably still a little rough around the edges now. But I feel like I really wanted to just kind of step outside of just being some kid from Pilsen and kind of expand and change my worldview on things. At least that's what I hope to accomplish. So.
I think for me it was coming from the south side of Chicago and being a black male, the statistics are if you can make it out of Chicago and age 15 as a black male, you're doing pretty well. And while I had succeeded, I think for me it was, I wanted to make sure, I think at times, even though I said I was confident, I wanted to make sure, or I wanted to believe that I was smart enough to do the major. Biology is how many bio majors do we have in here? Okay, a couple. Biology is tough, right? Like any other major, right? So, I wanted to have some self-compassion for myself to make sure that I was going to be able to hack it. And I'm the first physician in my family. My mom graduated from college. She is a retired Chicago public school teacher. My father never made it to college, but still did well and provided at times. But I think when I got here, it was some self-doubt of, am I ready for this? Even though I knew what I was going to do, I was going to major in biology. But and I even think back at being in my classes, being probably one of the few men of color in my classes, that not wanting to be a statistic. Could I hack it? Will I survive? Because I got a couple of bad grades in like organic chemistry. I never did that in Ken Kramer's class. I always passed his classes. All right, but yeah, that for me that was the struggle, and then also my mom. I think there was a lot of pressure on me to do well. She just growing up instilled in me that I needed to be better. And when I say that, I went to for high school, my boarding school was predominantly white, and I always felt that there was a microscope on me, and I kind of felt the same way at Monmouth, but I wanted to make sure that to prove to myself that I was meant to be here, I was meant to be in that course, that I was going to hack it. Obviously, I did, but that was my narrative.
Thank you. When, during your years here, did you realize that you had grown past that person that arrived on day one? And how did that realization of growth make you feel? What experience on campus or in your life at that time do you credit most to that change or growth?
Okay, so I think that the people sitting on the stage can tell you that I went through several changes in life and lots of growth in the time that I was here. So I have a couple of different instances. One was, I'm going to say probably, so I took a year off in between all my years here at Monmouth. I took a year off, and when I came back, Monmouth, it started to kind of change and started to kind of grow, and we were, as a class, kind of working towards making some changes, right? And I mean, we had been a freshman and sophomore year, but it kind of, all of our work had started kind of to come to fruition, in my time back. And so I was really excited. And so just, having that feeling of like, where, I wasn't a skeptic like I was my freshman year, coming back and feeling that energy and having that like drive to really make a difference and really, make this our campus for everyone, right? So that kind of was a change. I felt like I really started to reach out, really started to identify with the different groups on campus and what they represented. So that was one thing. Probably feeling comfortable in my own skin. I met my first serious girlfriend on this campus and fell in love on this campus. And being able to openly say that was not something that was okay for me, right? So feeling that way and feeling like, yeah, it is okay. That moment came when I went to my first gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, and ally college conference. And Ken and Trudy in the back drove us there. And to this day, they are just like awesome to me because of that, right? So I'm gonna tear up. Going there and just experiencing holy cow, there are so many gay people in this world. Like it's like, for me, I didn't have that experience growing up, right? So I didn't know that I could be gay and be out in the world, and everybody was okay with it, So, thankfully, that experience just, really opened up my eyes and my world. When I first had a discussion with that first girlfriend about being out on campus, I said, and it's still a joke to this day because we're still friends, I said to her, we're not going to hold hands and walk across campus together. Like, that's not going to happen. And it's funny to me now, and it's probably funny to people I went to school with, because we were so out on this campus. And very involved. And so that was, and I credit, Kramer and Trudy for being able, allowing us to have that safe space, that energy, that acceptance, and bringing us to this conference where we were like, okay, this is the energy we feel, let's bring it back to campus, and we did. So that was another change. And then just, beyond that, my career kind of took a change when I was just in conversation, was talking to this great man sitting right next to me. And I was talking to him about how I just enjoyed working with people, and I had no interest in psychology at the time, but I was talking to him, and he said, well, why don't you do this for a living, like work with people, like be in social services, or, be a psych major. And I thought, well, heck, I've never thought about that. Like, let me figure this out. Let me check this out. And, here we are all these years later. I've been in the field for 17 years, and I just can't imagine doing anything else. So, I knew that, once I started to connect with all of these different people, whether it be our international, friends that I have that live all over the world, that we have that live all over the world, I knew that I would, take all of this experience beyond Monmouth and just kind of, bring it to the world and do something great with it, and at least in my own corner of the world, I feel like I'm doing that.
Thank you, Carmen. Speak to the moments when you realized that your tribe and your campus-grown community would carry you beyond your college experience. How have those relationships across many miles and intersections helped to keep you level?
All right, so is this a space where we could be authentic and be completely real?
Yeah.
That was kind of like, that wouldn't give me a lot of assurance. Like, is this a brave space where we could be real and have authentic conversation? Because that's going to, all right, bet. Okay, thank you. So, so that moment for me, and Frank, Dr. Clark may be able to attest to this, there was, when I was on campus, like I said, being a little older, I noticed that there was a lot of tension with a lot of the brothers on campus, right? For whatever reason, cats just did not, like each other, or they were fighting over a woman or what have you, and it got to the point where it was, I felt like it was a powder keg. So me not having any therapy tools, I just recognized that, brothers need to work it out. And so fortunately, I had a key to the Hubbard House, Lord rest the Hubbard House. That was, for all intents and purposes, that was our cultural center. And Dean Massoud, for whatever reason, he gave me a key. And he was like, use this as you see fit. So I always appreciate him for that, because that was a safe haven for us, but I digress. So I just randomly had this key to the Hubbard, and I just got all the brothers. I said, look, whatever, I think it was like a Friday. I was like, be here this time. We about to bang this out. Whether we, fisticuffs or talk, whatever comes first, we got to get this right, because there's not that many of us, and we need to look out for each other. We can't be beefing and just squabbling amongst each other. And that was one of the most powerful moments on campus, because, we did some storming, norming, and forming, and let me tell you, I mean, it was really raw. Again, like I said, I'm not a therapist by trade or anything, especially not at that time. Just a lot of it was just innate, going with my gut, making certain everyone had opportunity to have the floor. A lot was revealed in that circle, and there was a lot of healing that took place. So much so that cats were so. We were just all in the fields that we got cars, we borrowed cars, and we went down to Bradley to the Black Greek Weekend, and we just kicked it like as brothers. And I mean, and it was so infectious. We came back, and we used to sit in the back tables of the cafeteria, and all the young women that we hung with. I think they were upset because we didn't invite them, but they didn't understand the context. And so I just remember we came in, talking about all the fun we had. We sat down, and then in unison, they all got their trays and got up and dipped, right? And then I think they ended up doing the same because we seen them at some of the parties the next day. But I say all that to say that was a moment for me where I felt like I realized that, maybe I do have a gift, in just being able to bring folks together in a disarming fashion and have real honest conversation, identify root causes to the issue, and come work with solutions, but understanding and also being able to recognize, and appreciate who we are, our backgrounds, what we come into this world with, and so moving forward, even now, I feel very fortunate that I could be a vault for a lot of my, campus, my contemporaries, my colleagues, even as adults. We stay in touch, and like I was talking to Dr. Clark, I said, it's amazing. We don't always have to talk to each other every day. Mm-hmm. Well, when we do hook up, we can pick up where we left off. I can go anywhere in this country and in this world, and I've done this at conferences. I go out to California. I hook up with some of the, people I went to school with here. My man James in Kansas City, my old roommate Puff in St. Louis. We can go years without talking, and I can call them up and say, hey, I'm in your city, and they'd be like, bro, come through. And so I really appreciate, and that's not just with my peers. It also extends to a lot of the faculty and staff that work here. I remember shortly after I left, when I graduated, I worked for Monmouth College for a little bit, and then when I left, I contacted Mindy Damewood, who had transitioned over to the library, but she used to work in the Wackerly Career Center, and when I was a student, she helped me put together my resume. And, I was, trying to apply for some high-level positions, and my resume was whack, and so I just called Mindy, and I said, hey, as an alum, can I still benefit from services? And she said, absolutely, you can. And so, and then even through social media, whenever there's something going down, and I think Trudy has reached out to some of us as like thought partners, and that feels really good because now we feel like we're colleagues, sort of on the same level, or whatever the case may be. Or like I said, my mom Cheryl, Mama Mika is always sending me and my fam, love, through the book. And so I always feel like that regardless of how much time and distance, some of those relationships that we forged as peers, along with the faculty and staff in our lives, I feel like it's still very present. And professionally, personally, I could always I have just a great network of people that I can talk to about anything professionally or personally.
Thank you, Ken. We have a couple more questions before we open up for a little bit of Q&A. In reflection, how did the person you grew into here impact your decisions on your choice of career or your life's work? Dr. Clark.
Oh, that's a good one. All right. So I told you guys I showed up on campus, I was going to be a bio major, going to med school. I was going to be a pediatrician, and then you couldn't convince me otherwise. So I did end up going to medical school. I did not become a pediatrician, but I'm a psychiatrist. And as I think back, so all this ambition, did well in my classes, graduated magna cum laude, graduated in 3.5 years from Monmouth College. Proud of my degree, proud of my accomplishments. Got a full ride scholarship to medical school, which is not heard of often, to Northwestern University, which people know about Northwestern in Chicago. And so things were going well for me, and towards the end of my college career, all those things that I had suppressed for quite some time kind of erupted like a volcano. And I dealt with or was diagnosed with clinical depression, and probably was depressed for quite some time, probably back in high school. And not many people knew that on campus. That's not something that I disclosed. I didn't even know it until I was diagnosed with it, because I went through some hardships towards the end of my college career that some people knew about and some didn't. And it changed my view on things. But I'm a stronger person for it. I've been in remission now for 9 years. I still do my own therapy, because in order to take care of my patients, I have to take care of myself. But it was a rough summer for me, because after I graduated, I stayed in Monmouth for a while and was dating someone, not the person I'm married to now, but went through a rocky relationship, and things just started to come to the surface for me, and so I needed to seek help. But I talked about being busyness, and what that did for me. It was a double-edged sword for me, because while keeping busy kept me well-rounded, I'm thankful for Monmouth for that, but it also allowed me to avoid all of those demons and things that I did not address growing up as a child. And so you can imagine graduating from going to running track, cross country, structure on a daily basis, singing in the choir, all those things that were very important to me. I kind of lost that, and I lost myself. So as I reflect back, it's not surprising that I went into psychiatry. I didn't know I was going to be a psychiatrist until I actually was in my third year of medical school, and it was kind of that aha moment for me based on some of the experiences I've had. But and especially in the Black community, to say that you have depression is that's like you don't do that. We don't do that, especially in Black males. And if you looked at the statistics right now, suicide is very prevalent among Black males and also just Black adolescents. So at a time where there was still a huge stigma with mental health, to actually acknowledge that as a Black male I was going through some inner turmoil and actually had depression, I didn't want to acknowledge that. So.
Thank you for sharing that. So, this is the fun part that we joked about last night and for the last month as we've talked on the phone and gotten together. If you could tell the person you were in question one thing in reflection, what would that be?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. Again, I was 21 when I transferred here in '97, and now thinking about that, my 44-year-old self. Why y'all laughing a little too hard, yo? I put a lot of pressure on myself back then because there wasn't very many of us students of color, Black men. So I put a lot of, I think, unnecessary pressure to represent for a culture and didn't really understand the nuances in that we're not a monolithic group. But, I didn't have that sophistication in my thinking then, so I felt like I always had to be on. I was older, I was first gen, so even if I didn't know it, we say we fake it till you make it. And so in doing that, I think I didn't allow myself to really enjoy college, and then I also, even though I'm from Peoria, I had never lived away, and even just being an hour away. And so I still had this mentality where I was afraid to, sort of be off my block, so to speak. So I missed out on a lot of opportunities. I would tell my 21-year-old self, study abroad, ACM, off-campus study, I think I missed a lot of opportunities there because I was so nervous just and afraid just being at Monmouth that was an accomplishment that I didn't take advantage, and I really didn't understand, how affordable to travel, abroad would be through, the tuition exchange as opposed to now trying to, book a trip out the country as an adult, So, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, and I also would tell myself, don't be afraid to take risks and to reframe failure. I think I was so afraid to fail that I didn't take risk and opportunities, so I didn't try in some cases. And I think I missed on, even though I had a great experience, I think I missed out on a lot of opportunities, sort of posturing and putting on and being one way to appeal and to appease other people instead of myself.
Thank you, Ken.
All right, Kenny took part of my answer, so that's cheating. I think definitely fear of failure and just kind of, I would definitely tell myself to kind of be open and be open to possibilities, be open to failures, to kind of learning from those failures, and just kind of let your voice be heard, especially when, seeking help. Like I said, I was the youngest of 5. Parents worked a lot, to raise 5 kids, take some dough. So I grew up very independently, and still to this day I'm very independent. And so it took a lot for me to be vulnerable on campus, to seek help for different things that I needed, that, if I wasn't sure about something in a class or whatever, I'm just not going to know it or whatever. So I think I really, really cheated myself out of a lot for that reason, just kind of fear of being vulnerable. So, I think that's the one thing I would definitely urge myself to allow myself to be more vulnerable to things.
Thank you, Carmen.
So I would say to my former self, say I'm 38, not as old as Ken. That's true. That's true. Black don't crack though too. So right. But I would say to myself to have self-compassion. So, and not to be perfect. I think as I look at you all in the audience, we were going through campus this morning, and we were just looking at all the resources that you guys have, and the resources that we had resources, but not like this. All right. And I think there's just such a added pressure nowadays especially for college students, just to, oh my God, like if I get a B, I'm a horrible person, or even if I get a C, I'm not gonna, I don't know, maybe some of you want to go to law school, med school, graduate school, whatever. Just because you get a C or a B doesn't mean your dreams are shattered. You have self-compassion. Okay, I told you I did well in school, but there was times where I took some tests that I did not do well on, and you start getting into this imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, but it's a real thing. And I would just encourage you all throughout your journey of exploration to increase your self-compassion, and I would tell myself to decrease self-criticism if I was sitting in your seats. So.
Thank you. You guys understand why they're 3 of my best friends now. They're pretty cool. Before I turn it over to questions, and I wanted to put out there that we have some really cool activities going on. This afternoon we are having a meet and greet at the house at the Intercultural House at 2. So please feel free to stop by tonight, you athletes. Dr. Clark is going to share some of his wisdom about mental wellness and athletics. And then tomorrow, some of you will have the pleasure of seeing them out and about on campus in your classrooms. So without further ado, I know we are on borrowed time, but I would suspect that there are a few questions out there. So Professor Baugh has put the microphone strategically around, so we would welcome any questions that you might have. I should have known.
Hi. Do I stand up? I'm gonna stand up. Okay. Hi, my name is Abier Minor. I'm a junior here. Can you hear me? Yep. No. My name is Abier Minor. I'm a junior here. My question is, during your time at college, did you ever experience burnout? What did you do to combat that burnout? And is there any knowledge that you would have just going into like the pressures of trying to find your career? Like, how did you find your path?
Go ahead.
Burnout. So during the time we were here, I don't even think burnout was even a term that was used.
Right.
But in retrospect, I would say that I probably did experience burnout. Again, tackling so many things between being a student athlete and singing and other things. I think I did experience burnout, but not to the extent. I've experienced burnout as a physician, and the burnout I experienced as a physician was not the burnout that I experienced as a college student. I actually overall enjoyed my college experience, but burnout does happen. I think the things that I would embolden people and empower people to do if you are experiencing burnout, one, I think that comes from also having a perfectionist attitude, like I have to be perfect, and perfectionism, there's nobody that's perfect. I would also say that sometimes I think people can, I remember taking 18 credits at one point, which in retrospect was dumb. I can acknowledge that. I think it's important to know your bandwidth. People understand that when I'm saying bandwidth? Okay. If you don't know your bandwidth, you will say yes to everything. And it's okay to say no to some things, okay? So that's one thing I've learned throughout my career that has helped decrease burnout for me, because I like to do a lot of things, but I have to realize, and my wife will tell you that she keeps me on a tight leash, especially with having a 9-month-old daughter now. One of the ways to decrease burnout is to know your bandwidth and be able to say no to things. There will always be opportunities. But not every opportunity that presents itself means that you have to say yes to that opportunity. And so, in terms of I think your other question was the path question. Yeah, go ahead.
So you asked about how did you find your path? Check, 1, 2. All right. So, I told them this morning that when I came here, I kind of went topical major in terms of art and business because this is an old reference and I get that. But at the time, the movie Boomerang came out and I wanted to be Eddie Murphy's character, Marcus, right? I just thought this brother is doing this thing in the advertising world. He's killing it. And I was like, I want to pattern myself after this brother, right? And anyway, in doing so, in taking in leadership roles, I got involved I became an RA, was president of some organizations here, and I start finding passion in leadership and helping other. I didn't even realize we had that conversation, Carmen. So thank you for reminding me of that. But I found myself throughout my career, from some of my failures and my persistence, helping other people find a path that was in line with their passion, and also encouraging them to say that you can switch it up too. You don't have to. If you start out here, that don't necessarily mean that you have to stay on this path. You can walk several paths, and that's how they got me with the whole liberal arts, sort of education or what have you. So that's what I would, from my experience, that's what I would offer to you is to, discover what your passion is. And I know you don't want to be broke either, but, find out how, you could live your best life, do the work that you want to do and still get paid for it. So fortunately for me, I've been able to, continue on in leadership in higher ed and in school districts, and I consult on the side. So, you don't live high on the hog in education, but I've been able to take my talents and use them to help organizations, school districts become more effective, through diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah, to go along with that, there's not a whole lot of money in social services either, but have found that when you do what you love with energy, you will have plenty to get by on. I have made a pretty good living in social services because it's my passion, and I have that energy, and people see that. People see that you bring energy and you bring this passion to your work, and they definitely want to make sure that you're compensated for that energy and that passion. So the money will come. You're not going to be a millionaire probably, but the money will come. And if you are a millionaire, hit me up. The other thing is you have to combat burnout, you have to know definitely what helps kind of take your mind away from that stress and that the daily struggles. I'm sure Frank can attest to this. You hear some horrible stories in the field that we're in, and you can't take that with you. And sometimes it creeps up on you, and you don't realize you take it with you, right? But I am very lucky that, in my life, and probably through a difficult childhood that I had, but in my life, I've learned to kind of shut my mind off and just kind of de-stress. When I was a senior, probably 2 weeks before finals, I started a 10,000-piece mosaic puzzle, and everybody thought I was nuts. They're like, what the hell are you doing? You should be studying for finals of your senior year. And I said, I know what I'm doing. I know what I need to do. I needed to shut my brain off for a little while every night just to work on this puzzle. And I completed it, and then I left it in the damn house, and the house got torn down. But anyway, as every house on this campus that I've ever lived in got torn down. But it wasn't even about completing the puzzle. It was just about getting that stress off of me. So I would say definitely just know yourself and know how you decompress, and do it. Find the time to do it because you need to.
Thank you. It's getting close to time, so I respect that some of you have to slip out. Are there any other questions? I see someone pointing.
So you said that you guys had friends across the country.
You speak up.
Sorry. You said that you guys had friends across the country, in different countries. How do you guys connect back to them?
Facebook, definitely. But I email, text, different, we all have friends that live in every corner of the world pretty much. Africa, Trinidad, different corners of Africa. Several other countries, I can't even name them all, Nepal and Costa Rica and whatnot. And it's been so incredible to just learn from different cultures in that way. And for me, I'm like, who'd have thunk it? That I could find all of these friends from all over the world in little Monmouth. But we did. I mean, they're just, all over. And sometimes they will come and visit the U.S., and I hope to visit some of them in their countries, from throughout my life. I would love to go and visit, like Dominic in Zambia. So that's kind of how we, mostly through Facebook, but definitely, emails and texts and things like that.
Anyone else? Okay. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you all for being a fantastic audience. I hope you enjoyed the nostalgia, and I hope you enjoyed the walk-in music. Have a wonderful day. Happy homecoming week.